7 wonders, 100 million votes, and a scandal so big one of the ancient world's most legendary structures didn't even make the final cut. If you've heard of the 7 wonders of the world, odds are you're picturing the pyramids. But here's the twist, the pyramids aren't actually on that list. Not officially, not anymore. This ranking you've heard about your whole life. It's not ancient. It's younger than YouTube itself, decided by a global vote that ran for 7 years and pulled in over 100 million ballots from ordinary people, just like you. And when the votes were counted, the most famous ancient structure on Earth got left standing outside the club, only to be let back in through the side door as an honorary member. Nobody's ever fully explained whether that was fair. So which 7 structures actually won? How does this modern list stack up against the original 7 wonders from 2,200 years ago? And why does almost everyone get this wrong? Let's clear it up once and for all. Quick context before we count them down. In the year 2000, a Swiss-Canadian filmmaker named Bernhard Weber launched a campaign called New 7 Wonders. The idea: let the public, not historians, not governments, decide which structures deserve to be called wonders of the modern world. Over the next 7 years, the campaign collected more than 100 million votes by phone and internet, and in 2007, in a stadium in Lisbon, the winners were announced live. By the end of this video, you'll know all 7 winners, the reason each one earned its spot, and exactly how they compare to the original Ancient Wonders list most people have never actually seen in full. Let's start the countdown. Let's start with the one everyone assumes is already on this list, the Great Wall of China. Stretching across northern China, the wall isn't one continuous structure. It's a patchwork of walls, forts, and watchtowers, built and rebuilt by different dynasties over roughly 2,000 years, with some sections dating back to the 7th century BC, and most of what still stands today built during the Ming dynasty in the 14th to 17th centuries. Estimates for its total length vary wildly, from about 5,500 miles for the Ming-era sections alone to over 13,000 miles if you count every wall, branch, and trench ever connected to the system. That range exists because archaeologists keep finding buried sections that historical maps forgot about. But the wall wasn't built to be impressive. It was built out of fear, a defense against nomadic invasions from the north, and it cost the lives of untold numbers of laborers, some of whom, according to persistent legend, were buried within the wall itself. Historians can't confirm that detail, but the legend alone tells you how brutal the project felt to the people who lived through it. So a defensive scar across a continent became a symbol of national identity. That's the first wonder. Next, one that vanished from the map entirely for over 800 years. In the deserts of modern-day Jordan, there's a city carved directly into rose-colored sandstone cliffs, and for most of the last 1,000 years, almost nobody outside the region knew it existed. Petra was the capital of the Nabateans, a trading civilization that controlled the incense and spice routes between Arabia and the Mediterranean. They didn't just carve tombs and temples into rock for decoration. They engineered a hidden water system of channels, cisterns, and dams that let a city thrive in the middle of a desert. The most famous structure, the treasury, isn't actually a treasury. It's a royal tomb, and the name comes from a local legend that pirates hid gold inside an urn carved into its facade. You can still see bullet marks on that urn, left by treasure hunters who tried to shoot it open. After the Nabatean kingdom fell and trade routes shifted, Petra was gradually abandoned, and it stayed hidden from the Western world until a Swiss explorer disguised himself as a Muslim pilgrim to sneak in and see it in 1812. A city built to move goods safely across a desert. Now imagine a civilization that built cities to track the movement of the stars instead. In the jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula sits Chichen Itza, a city built by the Maya that doubles as a giant functioning calendar. The main pyramid, El Castillo, has 365 steps, one for each day of the year, split across 4 staircases representing the seasons. But the real trick happens twice a year, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, when sunlight hits the pyramid's stepped edges and casts a shadow that looks exactly like a serpent slithering down the staircase toward a carved serpent head at the base. That's not a coincidence. That's centuries of astronomical observation encoded directly into architecture, without telescopes, without written formulas, just careful generational tracking of where the sun falls. Chichen Itza was also home to one of the largest ball courts in ancient Mesoamerica, where a ritual sport was played with unclear but likely brutal stakes for the losing team. A calendar built from stone and shadow, but not every wonder on this list celebrates a civilization's brilliance. The next one was built to entertain a crowd that wanted blood. Rome's Colosseum could seat an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 spectators, and it hosted gladiator fights, staged hunts, and, if ancient accounts are accurate, even mock naval battles using flooded arena floors. Underneath the arena floor was a network of tunnels and cages called the hypogeum, where gladiators, prisoners, and animals waited before being lifted into the arena through trapdoors, sometimes to fight each other, sometimes to fight lions, tigers, or bears shipped in from across the empire. Historians still debate how many people actually died inside it. Estimates range from the low thousands to hundreds of thousands over the centuries it operated, and separating historical record from Roman propaganda is genuinely difficult. What's certain is that the Colosseum wasn't just a stadium. It was a political tool, a way for emperors to keep the public entertained, distracted, and loyal, all at once. The Taj Mahal in Agra, India, is a mausoleum, a tomb built by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died giving birth to their 14th child. Construction reportedly involved over 20,000 workers and took around 20 years to complete, using white marble transported from hundreds of miles away, inlaid with semi-precious stones in floral patterns so precise they still look machine-cut today, despite being carved entirely by hand in the 1600s. There's a popular legend that Shah Jahan planned to build a mirror-image tomb for himself in black marble across the river, and that he had the hands of his architects cut off afterward so they could never recreate it elsewhere. Most historians consider both stories to be myths with no solid evidence behind them, but they've stuck around for centuries because they fit the emotional weight of the building itself. Grief immortalized in marble. But the next wonder on this list wasn't discovered by the people who valued it most. It was found again by accident. High in the Peruvian Andes, at over 7,900 feet above sea level, sits Machu Picchu, an Incan estate believed to have been built in the mid-1400s for the Emperor Pachacuti. The Inca had no written language, no iron tools, and no wheels. Yet they cut and fit stone blocks so precisely that many walls still stand without mortar, tight enough that a knife blade reportedly can't slide between them. Machu Picchu was likely abandoned around the time of the Spanish conquest, but the Spanish never actually found it, which is probably why it survived so intact. It stayed hidden from the wider world until 1911, when American historian Hiram Bingham was led there by local farmers who already knew exactly where it was. So it wasn't really lost. It was simply never advertised to outsiders in the first place, and that quiet, deliberate secrecy is part of why it feels so untouched today. One more wonder to go before the real controversy. And this one isn't ancient at all. Standing atop Corcovado Mountain in Rio de Janeiro, Christ the Redeemer is, by a wide margin, the youngest structure on this entire list, completed in 1931. At 98 feet tall, including its pedestal, with an arm span of 92 feet, it was built using reinforced concrete and a soapstone exterior, a material chosen specifically because it resists weathering while still looking naturally textured up close. It was struck by lightning as recently as 2014, damaging a finger and part of its head, both since repaired. And it exists today largely because Brazilian Catholics in the 1920s worried their country was drifting towards secularism and wanted a monument that couldn't be ignored, visible from almost anywhere in the city below. A 20th century monument sitting on a list otherwise dominated by ancient and medieval sites. Which raises an obvious question. If a 1931 statue made the cut, why didn't the most famous ancient structure on the planet make it in as a full member? Here's the controversy. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the last surviving wonder of the original ancient list, was in the final round of voting alongside these 7. But the organizers behind New 7 Wonders made a decision that upset a lot of historians and pretty much the entire country of Egypt. They declared Giza an honorary wonder, sitting outside the official New 7, on the reasoning that it was already a wonder from the ancient list and therefore didn't need to compete for a new title. Egyptian officials weren't satisfied with that explanation. Some accused the organizers of running a popularity contest with no real historical oversight, since anyone with a phone and enough spare change could vote as many times as they wanted. The organization pushed back, insisting Giza's status was a mark of respect, not exclusion. Either way, you end up with 8 structures people casually call the 7 Wonders, one official list of 7, and one 4,500-year-old pyramid standing just outside the frame, still older than all of them combined, and still the only ancient wonder you can visit in person today. And that leads to the list almost nobody has actually seen end to end, the original 7 Wonders, the ones the new list was named after in the first place. Let's go back roughly 2,200 years to the world's first attempt at ranking the greatest structures on Earth. The original list came from ancient Greek writers, most notably a poet named Antipater of Sidon, around the 2nd century BC. Unlike the modern version, there was no public vote. It was essentially a well-traveled Greek's personal shortlist of the most impressive things worth seeing, which is also why every single entry sits in the Mediterranean or Middle East, the parts of the world Antipater and his contemporaries actually had access to. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2560 BC as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu, is the oldest wonder on this list by well over 1,000 years, and the only one still standing today. It was also the tallest man-made structure on Earth for roughly 3,800 years, a record nothing broke until the construction of Lincoln Cathedral in England in the 1300s. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are the strangest entry on the list, because historians still aren't entirely sure they existed at all. Ancient writers described tiered terraces of lush greenery in the middle of the Mesopotamian desert, supposedly built by King Nebuchadnezzar for a homesick wife who missed the mountains and forests of her homeland. But no archaeological remains have ever been confirmed, and some historians now think the writers may have actually been describing gardens in the rival city of Nineveh instead. The statue of Zeus at Olympia stood roughly 40 feet tall inside a temple, built from ivory and gold plates layered over a wooden frame, depicting the king of the Greek gods seated on an elaborate throne. It was so revered that ancient writers claimed dying without seeing it in person was a personal misfortune. It was eventually destroyed, likely by fire, sometime after the temple fell into disuse. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus in modern-day Turkey was rebuilt at least twice after being destroyed, once by a flood, and later, according to ancient accounts, deliberately burned down by a man named Herostratus, purely so his name would be remembered by history. The city responded by making it illegal to even speak his name, a punishment that obviously failed, since we're still saying it more than 2,300 years later. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was the tomb of a regional ruler named Mausolus, and it was so famous that his name is the literal origin of the word mausoleum itself. Standing around 148 feet tall and decorated with sculpted friezes and marble statues, it survived for close to 1,100 years before earthquakes gradually brought it down, and later, medieval crusaders recycled its stones to build a nearby castle. The Colossus of Rhodes was a massive bronze statue of the sun god Helios, built to celebrate the island of Rhodes, surviving a lengthy siege. Standing at roughly 108 feet tall, close to the height of the Statue of Liberty without its pedestal, it stood for only about 54 years before an earthquake snapped it at the knees. Contrary to the popular image of it straddling the harbour entrance, most historians agree it almost certainly stood on land near the port. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, built on the island of Pharos in Egypt, stood somewhere between 330 and 440 feet tall, making it one of the tallest structures in the ancient world, and it functioned for over 1,600 years before a series of earthquakes finally toppled it in the 14th century. Its design, a tiered tower using mirrors and fire to reflect light out to sea, influenced lighthouse construction for centuries afterward, and its name is where we get the word Pharos, still used in some languages today to mean lighthouse. 6 of those 7 wonders are gone, some for over 1,000 years, known to us only through fragments, ancient writers, and a handful of archaeological digs. Only Giza remains, which is exactly why the organizers of the modern list felt they couldn't just let it compete like everything else. It wasn't really in the same category, it was the only surviving proof that the original list was ever real. So here's where that leaves us. 7 modern wonders chosen by public vote: the Great Wall of China, Petra, Chichen Itza, the Colosseum, the Taj Mahal, Machu Picchu, and Christ the Redeemer. 1 honorary wonder holding the whole concept together: the Great Pyramid of Giza. And 7 ancient wonders, 6 of which now exist only in written descriptions and scattered ruins. Picture that timeline stretched out. A 4,500-year-old pyramid on one end, a 1931 concrete statue on the other, and in between, deserts, jungles, empires, and earthquakes that quietly erased most of what people once considered indestructible. If you had to guess which of today's structures will still be standing in another 4,000 years, drop your pick in the comments. Because if history's taught us anything on this list, it's that nothing built by human hands is actually permanent. Subscribe for more deep dives like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.